Hello, my name is Tammy Medlin and I am the local history librarian here at the Wilson County Public Library. I'd like to welcome you to Introduction to Genealogy. What is genealogy? Genealogy is the study of ancestry and family histories, the record of a person's descent from a specific person, family, or other group of people. In short, genealogy is your family tree. Now, I have a couple of hints for you before you begin working on your family tree. 1. Write down what you know or have been told about names, dates, locations, etc. It doesn't have to be 100% correct, but it helps to have possibilities to help narrow down your search. Number 2, learn to read cursive. Forms were filled out by hand, not with a typewriter, so a lot of information, especially names, were written in cursive. So learning to read it will help your search go a lot smoother. Today we're going to focus on 2 genealogy databases, one that you can use here in the library and the other that you can access from home with your library card. We are going to be talking about Ancestry Library Edition and Heritage Quest. Those are what we're going to be focusing on, but we are going to talk about genealogy in general. Ancestry Library Edition. Everybody in genealogy has heard about Ancestry. Well, there's 2 different databases. There's Ancestry.com you buy a subscription for and you can use anywhere. Ancestry Library Edition can only be used in the library. To reach Ancestry Library Edition, go to our library's website at wilsoncountypubliclibrary.org and put your cursor on the Services tab. Under Services, choose Genealogy and Local History, scroll down, and click on the Ancestry Library Edition icon. This is the home page for Ancestry Library Edition. To begin, go up to the top and click on the Search tab. Now I have just clicked on Search in Ancestry Library Edition, and I chose for my type of record to look in the census. Specifically, I chose U.S. Census 1880, and there is a reason for that you'll find later. And I do not know the information to put in all these blanks, so I put in what I do know. I put in Evan Bryant, born about 1831. I did not put in exact. I did not put in where he was born because I'm not sure. I do know at some point he lived in Nash County, North Carolina. He's buried there. The family's still there. I know his wife's name was Mary. I did not list his father's name or his mother's name or his sibling's name. You can if you know it, but when you're just starting out, you might not. And I put gender as male, and if you know the race, you can put that as well. And then you click search and see what you come up with. This is my results page. They're looking at census and voting lists. They're looking for Evan Bryant, and you can see they got found over 2,000 names that could be Evan Bryant. Well, I don't want to sit and click through 2,000 names. So what I do is I go over here to the side where Evan, and I go from broad to exact. I will go from similar to sounds like to that is the exact name. If I was looking for Charlie, I might do exact and similar because he could be listed as Charles, he could be listed as Charlie. Bryant, I'm going to be moved to exact because that is his exact name. I know how they spell it. If not, you could do similar or sounds like. Stop there, just narrow it down a little bit. Born 1831, I'm not going to mess with that. I'm not exactly sure of his date of birth. This was before birth certificates. Lived in Nash County, North Carolina. If I move it towards exact, it's the first thing it's going to give me is it's going to narrow it down to the country. I want to go further than that. It's going to narrow it down to the state I chose. Then it's going to narrow it down to the county and surrounding counties, and then to the county. I usually stop at counties and surrounding counties because for all I know, I thought Nash, but it could be Edgecombe, could be Wilson, you just don't know. But then when I clicked apply all that, I was down to like under 200 names, which is a whole lot easier. And the ones most likely to be him are listed at the top. So this is Evan right here, Evan N. Bryant in 1880 in Nash County. So we're going to click on that and see what we have. Okay, I clicked on the top result on my search page, and I pulled up the results from the 1880 census. And usually this would be one long screen, but I put the top on the left and the bottom of the screen on the right. It's Evan N. Bryant. He's 49 years old. He's a farmer. He's married. He's in North Carolina. His spouse's name is Mary A. Bryant, and he's a farmer. And if you scroll on down past all these other questions they sometimes ask, you get that he's 49, Mary A is 40, their daughter is Mary E, she's 23. You also have John, Miley, Dorsey, Julia, Robert, George, and Vidalia. I know there were at least 2 more children because Theodosia was already married at this point and out of the house, and there was another child, Ralph, who was born after 1880. But what is so important is this is the first time they not only list the name of everybody in the house, but they list the age and they list their relationship to the head of household, which in this case is Evan. Now, if you saw the icon that looked like a little sheet of paper on the left-hand side of the previous screen, that is showing you an image of the original document. I clicked on it. It opened up and showed me the original census, not where somebody had read it and typed it in to make it easier to read. This is a picture of the actual document. I have zoomed in on this, the part of the page that concerns us, not just, not the whole page. I've zoomed in so we can read it, but you can see here it's Evan Bryant, Mary A, Mary E, John, Miley. It's got all the information, and then you can scroll on down. It can tell you if they're sick. It can tell you what all the family members' occupation was. Mary is listed as keeping house. Mary is listed as domestic servant. John is a farm laborer, and so on. And then it would ask your birthplace of father, birthplace of mother. All these questions all the way across the screen. Questions changed every census. So this is the actual document. This is why I said learn to read cursive. When you look at the previous screen, they could have mistyped the name. They could have misspelled the name because this person, census taker, had very good handwriting. You may get somebody who was in a hurry. Their writing's kind of cramped. It's hard to read. They may form their letters differently, and this is where mistakes happen. We talked about the Hathaway family. I could not find them in one census, and it was because somebody had transcribed their name as Hathaway, Haulthaway, instead of Hathaway. They had misspelled the name. I've seen Molly as Mally. Just all different kinds of ways that you can misread the name because of the handwriting. And, if you're not taught how to read it, it's going to take you a little bit longer to do your genealogy. Well, we found a lot of information on Evan Bryant and Mary Ann. One question I get asked a lot is, how do I keep up with the information I find? Well, you keep up with it in charts. It's called a pedigree chart or an ancestry chart or a family tree. This one was actually found at Ancestry Library Edition. Ancestry.com also has them, and you can download them and print them out. And this basically traces one person's descent. So this line, the first line that's by itself would be my name. Then it would have my parents' names, all of my grandparents' names, and my great-grandparents' names. And then we'd keep on going back, and eventually 2 of those names would be Evan Bryant and Mary Ann. And then it would come on down till it got to me. So that is tracing one line or one person. This is an example of a family group sheet. It is used to show all the people in an immediate family, mother, father, children. Why would you need these? Well, suppose you want to do the whole family and all the descendants. Suppose you come from this person on more than one line. You're kin to them through more than one way, which is the case for me. This is what's called a family group sheet. Now, if you remember back, Evan and Mary had 8 children listed on the 1880 census. They actually had 10. And this is the family group sheet for one of their daughters, Theodosia, who was already married in 1880. and she married John Hathaway, and you can see Theodosia died first. Theodosia died in 1881, and John lived into 1889. They had one child, Charlie Hathaway, and he was born in 1877 or 1878. Now, why would I keep this chart? Well, I'm descended from Charlie. I know that. But what happened is after Theodosia died, John married one of her sisters. This is the next group sheet in my collection. It shows that Miley, who was also the daughter of Evan and Mary Ann, married her sister Theodosia's widower, John Hathaway, and went on to have 3 children with him, George, Nick, and Luann. And because John died in 1889 and Miley lived until 1923. Millie or Miley, depending on which spelling you see or how you pronounce it. She lived until 1923. And actually, there should be a third sheet because after John died, Miley remarried and had even more children. So if I want to keep up with all of Evan's descendants, I would at least need one group sheet for each one of his children. Because later on, 2 of their descendants did marry, and I'm descended from Evan twice. So you can be kin to someone on more than one line, and this helps you keep it straight, especially if somebody was married more than one time and you want to keep track of which husband or wife you are descended from. If you're wondering, well, it's kind of funny to marry your deceased wife's sister or your deceased husband's brother. Back then, not really. Even Charles B. Aycock, who later became governor of North Carolina, and he lived in Wilson, was originally from near Goldsboro, was from Fremont. He was married to Verena Woodard. They had children. Verena died, and Charles later married her sister Cora and had more children. So back then, it was not an uncommon practice. Now, we have spent a lot of time, our example today has been searching the census, but the census is not the only record you need for genealogy. It's every 10 years, someone's spouse can die and they can remarry within those 10 years. A child can be born and die within those 10 years. People move around within those 10 years. So you really need more records. And 2 of the ones we're going to look at as marriage records and death records. But I also wanted to point out to you that the census changed. The census began, the first one for the U.S. was in 1790, then you had 1800, 1810, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 1900, and so on. The problem is the census changed. From 1790 to 1840, it only listed the name of the head of household. So it would, it said William Bryant, didn't list Evan and his brothers. It just said William Bryant. It had a column for males, and you would have 1 mark for males under 5, males like 6 to 10, 15 to 20, like that. Females would be the same way. It wouldn't even list the wife. The only way a woman would be listed between 1790 and 1840 if she were the head of household. Usually in that case, it would mean she was a widow with minor children and she had not remarried. Usually that's the only way a woman would be listed by name in the census. By 1850, they are listing the name of everybody in the household, but not the relationships. You could see a child listed much younger and assume that's a late in life child. It could be a grandchild, it could be a nephew, it could be a niece, it could even be a boarder. You could have maybe you have a young adult, it could be a boarder. Somebody paying rent to live in the house with your family. By 1880, when we saw Evan, that is when it is listing the name of everybody in the house, the age of everybody in the house, and the relationship to Evan of everybody in the house. Mary's sister could have been living there, and it would have listed her as sister-in-law because that would have been her relation to Evan. So census has changed, and you do need other records. And like I said, what we're going to look at next are marriage records and death records. When we clicked search on Ancestry Library Edition, we chose the census. You can also choose a category called marriage, birth, and death records. They actually have kept marriage records longer then they have kept official birth and death records. Marriage licenses go back to colonial times, or in that case, they were called marriage bonds. And why they are important is it's one of the few places you can find the wife's maiden name and maybe even her parents. When a woman married, basically she would then use her husband's name. She might even say, well, I'm Mrs. Evan Bryant is what Mary would call herself. You might not even know her name was Mary Ann. You might not even know her name was Mary unless you knew her. Officially, she was Mrs. Evan Bryant, and that was legal. They actually had something called coverture, and that meant when a couple married, they had one legal identity, and that identity was established under the husband's name. So it's hard to retrace your maternal line, your mother's line, going back through the female line. So if you find a marriage record, now not all states are like this. This is from North Carolina, and you see it gives you Ralph Bryant applied for a license for the marriage of his son Howard Bryant, and it gives you his mother's name also, Lily Bryant, and he is marrying Mary Hathaway, and Mary's parents were Charlie Hathaway and Polly Hathaway. So this is a way to take Mary back another generation, not just Howard. So this is one of the places you could actually find your maternal line. This is a copy of a North Carolina death certificate. Now, unlike marriage certificates or marriage licenses, marriage bonds, use whatever word you want, death certificates have only been kept since about October 1913. And the information on them may not always be correct, or it can be misleading. Let me explain. This is a death certificate for Annie Barnes, who was born in 1917, died in 1919 when she was 2 years old. And the information on the certificate is only as good as the person giving it. Down here at the bottom, you can see informant was B.B. Barnes, who was Bernard Barnes, who actually happened to be her father. One reason you would want to use this, it gives the date of birth, the date of death. It also gives her mother's maiden name, Lanny Bass. But let me tell you about this child. I saw a notice in the Wilson Times online telling about the death of a grandson of a Mr. Barnes from the Crossroads community, and the child was the son of Mr. Bernard Barnes. Well, I couldn't find any records. I was curious about what the child's name was, give the parent's name, the grandparent's initials, but not the child's name. And I went and I found out who Bernard was married to, is married to Lanny Bass. That gives me, a place to start looking. When you enter a person's name on death records, it's going to find that person's name anywhere on that record. So not just the person who died, when I typed in Bernard Barnes and Lanny Bass, but if they were the parents of a child, which it turns out they were. Now, the date of this and the manner of death match what was in the newspaper article, but as you can see, Annie is clearly a girl's name, so it would have been a daughter, not a son. And then just to make it perfect, I looked at Find a Grave and saw a picture of the headstone, and it didn't say Annie, it said Miley Avis. So the dates matched, the parents' names matched, but the name didn't match. So I have figured out this child is a girl, but I have yet to figure out if this child was Annie or if she was Millie or Miley. I did look and I could not find a birth certificate, not saying she didn't have one. It's just an example of the records not being there, the records not being on Ancestry, not being available yet. I do not know if they would have them in the Register of Deeds near the Wilson County Courthouse. That is where death certificates, birth certificates, and marriage certificates are kept, are in the Register of Deeds. So I would have to go over there to see if I could figure out what this child's real name was. So the information is only as good as the person giving it, as good as what the informant knew. A lot of times you may see mother's name listed as unknown, her maiden name listed as unknown. You may see the father's name listed as unknown. But they are a way, if you are lucky, to get the parents, especially the mother's, maiden name. Unlike Ancestry, the Heritage Quest database can be accessed at home through NC Live by anyone who has a current library card. Return to the library's homepage at wilsoncountypubliclibrary.org and put your cursor on Services. This time, go to the Research tab. Scroll down and click on the NC Live icon. This is the NC Live homepage. Go to the middle of the page and click on Browse All Databases. This will bring up a screen with an alphabet across the top. Click on H, scroll down, and click on Heritage Quest. This is the home page for Heritage Quest. It doesn't contain all the records of Ancestry Library Edition, but it does allow you to search the census. So just scroll down to the bottom of the page, search U.S. Census, and it will operate the same way as Ancestry. It does have records Ancestry does not have, including city directories and other things like that. It also has access to a couple of books. So just, play around with it, see what you can find. And if you can't come into the library, you can still do your family tree. Now we're going to talk about how to start your genealogy search if you are looking in Wilson County. If you come to the local history room, which is on the second floor of the Wilson County Public Library on Nash Street, and you say, I'm interested in my family history, I want to work on my family tree, I'm going to say, what family are you looking for? You're going to give me a name. I'm going to say, is your family from Wilson? You tell me yes. I'm going to pull out this book. It's Wilson County's Founding Families, and I love it because, one, it's indexed, so we can go to the back, look up the surname you're looking for, then start looking for the first names, you find one you recognize, and then we'll turn to that page number and get started. Another reason I love this book is basically for a lot of family names, it's done some of the beginning research for you, and it does both African American and Caucasian family lines. So this is a sample, this is part of a page from the book, and you're looking up Barnes's. Now, if you look at Ben Barnes, you'll see a little square that's open. That lets you know the family is Caucasian. If you look up and you see Austin Barnes, you'll see the little square is filled in. That lets you know it's an African American line. And it will basically may tell you where the name came from, when it entered into the county. It will list some people and some information, their name, their age, maybe who their parents were, and where that information was found. So it may be found in the census. It may be found, like it says right here, Wilson marriages, Wilson 1870 and 1880 census. This is where they found the information on the Austin Barnes family. And it's just a really good place to start. So you're not starting from scratch. You don't need to go and reinvent the wheel if it's already there. It just gives you a beginning point. Now, a lot of people ask me about African American genealogy. The problem you run into is if your ancestors were enslaved, you're probably not going to find a lot of records. One of the first ones you will find is the 1870 census, because that is the first one after the Civil War when everyone was free, so everyone would have been recorded, their name, their age, family, that kind of thing. It's kind of tricky to go back before that, so they call it the 1870 block. Now, here in Wilson, we kind of have a way around that. We have a book, and on the spine it said Wilson Marriages or Wilson Marriage Registry. But when I opened the book and looked on the title page, I found out this says Marriage Register or Certificates to Freedmen and Women of Wilson County, North Carolina. Now, what that meant was slave marriages were not recognized by law. So what happened is after the Civil War, there was a certain period of time, and in Wilson, it was in August 1866, you could go down to the courthouse or the clerk of court and register your marriage, and to show that it was legal. Now, they would be given a certificate, but this is just a list of the people African Americans who were formerly slaves who came down to the courthouse and registered their marriage so it be seen as legal and their children as legitimate. If you are looking in other counties, records may not be listed under a marriage register. They may be listed as something called cohabitation bonds. But anyway, this is a close-up of one of the pages in our marriage register. And if you look, it gives the bride's name or the groom's name. And then over on the last column, it says August 1866. It gives the date the marriage was registered. But right here in the third column, it is telling you how long were you married before August 1866. And if you look right here at Reuben Dew and Nancy Farmer, as of August 25th, 1866, they had already been married 52 years. We have smashed that 1870 block to pieces because that takes that line back. That takes that couple back. I did the math. 52 from 66. We have taken that family back to 1814. Now, wherever you are doing genealogy in North Carolina, there are a couple of dates you need to remember. The 1870 census is the first one to list newly freed African Americans. The 1890 census was burned. It basically was completed. It was sent to D.C. The building caught fire, and what was not burned was damaged by water. So there's like only 6,000 names for the whole state. So when you're doing genealogy, you just skip that census. You go straight from 1870, 1880, you go straight to 1900. Another thing is census information, at least the personal information, is held for 72 years. The government will release the statistical information, what's the population of the town, demographics, everything like that. But as far as this person lived in this house with this family member and they were all this age, that's held for 72 years. So the 1950 census was the last census that was released. It's definitely the last one you're going to find on Ancestry. So if your parents, grandparents were born after 1950 or actually born after April or May of 1950, you're going to have to wait until 2032 to access that census online because 1950 was released in 2022. Also, what you need to know is North Carolina did not require birth and death certificates until 1913. You may find a county register of births and deaths. You may find obituaries for some people, but you're not going to find an official North Carolina birth or death certificate dated before October 1913. And basically, you're kind of rolling the dice looking for one between 1913 and 1915. By that time, basically, everyone was keeping the records the way they were supposed to. So if you're doing genealogy, it gets a little bit more intensive than just looking for birth certificates and death certificates. Now, before we end the program, I did want to talk about two other resources you can use. If you are interested in African American genealogy or the history of the African American community here in Wilson County in general, please visit Black Wide Awake. It is a blog by Lisa Henderson, who is a historian from Wilson County. It is wonderful. It is very searchable. We do try and get Lisa here to speak at the library occasionally. Please go take a look at it, Black Wide Awake. Also, if you are from North Carolina, but you are not from Wilson County and you're interested in genealogy, please visit the State Archives of North Carolina at 109 East Jones Street, Raleigh, North Carolina, 27601. Their phone number is 919-814-6840. They have a lot of resources, both there and some online that you can use from home. Please go take a look. Thank you for joining us for Introduction to Genealogy, and please come see me in the local history room at the Wilson County Public Library.